Hi, I'm Andrea Kozodoy, and I'm the social worker at Rosal Park High School. And this is Tiffany.
Hi, I'm Miss Tiffany. I'm the school social worker over at the academy. So I'm basically Mrs. K over at that school.
And we're here today to talk about stress management. We recognize that things have been very difficult during this time of pandemic. And so we just are here today to provide some strategies to address stress.
Okay, so we have a presentation, so I'm going to be able to share my screen so that you guys can see. Okay. So we're going to go through what is stress, symptoms of stress, causes of it, as well as how to cope with those. So when we talk about what is stress, it's a physiological, psychological, and behavioral response for an individual. So what that looks like is very specific towards a person. So you can be feelings of feeling worried, angry, scared, frustrated. Towards that individual, it looks very different. So some of those symptoms might be listed here for you. So you might have even physical pain like stomach pains, irritability, difficult sleeping, nauseous feelings, or even some headaches. And there also might be just social isolation, so some behavioral responses as well.
And often when we are experiencing physiological difficulties, there can be lower grade anxiety that we feel physically and higher grade anxiety which can appear like a panic attack. Sometimes we will experience feelings of nausea, feeling heartburn. Sometimes people even experience heart racing or things along those lines that can require us to get some assistance.
So as we talk about symptoms, we also have causes of stress. So these can be internal or external causes. So some things here, again, might be listed that you might feel as well. So feelings of guilt, thinking about the future, worrying about your grades or any school-related issues, any relationship difficulties or home stressors, such as family health. There can be domestic violence that's currently in the home, worries about expressing your sexuality openly within your home or with your friends. Again, some of these stressors could be happening before we were in quarantine, so some things might be even more now since we're inside most of the time. So there might be an added stress to that as well.
Right. You may find that when it talks about relationship difficulties, which is one of the more common ones you'll see at this time, that there could be some level of conflict between a parent and a child, between siblings. And so we just have to be mindful during this time of doing our best to keep the lines of communication open.
When we specifically talk about causes of stress, we wanted to kind of go into social media as well, because we find this definitely a stressor within students, but even adults as well. So we're finding that, I'm sure most of you guys have heard of FOMO before. So feelings of feeling left out, focusing a number of followers or likes that are going on your social media account. A lot of it sometimes can even be comparing ourselves to others. So I think mostly when we look at social media, we see a lot of positive things and people on vacations or just living a very wonderful life, and they don't really show the other side of things as well. So we often compare ourselves to that. I also think with social media, we tend to maybe focus more on that and not do other things as well. So isolation can come into that as well.
And a lot of times, especially on social media, you may see people who are, hanging out, and so you feel left out of that, which is very common as we start to progress into going back outside again, that it can be very difficult for people to see friends that are maybe hanging out, and you feel discluded from that. And one thing we talk a lot about at the high school as well, Ms. Tiffany, is that we'll talk about students who may be experiencing sadness already or anxiety already, and so they'll tend to pick up their phone to look at their social media as a way to deal with feeling anxious or feeling sad, and so they turn to social media and then in turn might see their friends who are spending time together or see people communicating and they feel left out. So it's almost like a second level of anxiety or stress or sadness that students might be feeling, because in a time of need when they want to feel a part of something, now they feel even more left out.
Mm-hmm. So then we can even propose the question of like, how do we make that a more positive experience? So even looking at social media, we see different accounts that have, a positive outlet, or even different quotes or certain affirmations that you can even look at. So there are accounts out there that definitely we can use in a positive way, but try not to isolate ourselves in those moments.
Right. And I actually think that there's a great way of using things like Pinterest or something like that as a way to get creative at home, or to create projects that parents and teenagers or children can do together as a way to help the time pass and to feel an increased a sense of self-esteem.
Mm-hmm. So I know we talked a lot about like stress, where it can be sort of negative in a way, and in this case, like in a harmful way. So I kind of wanted to go into something that can be harmful, but as well as helpful. So when we look at stress, we think of, things that can be negative causes. So whether it's we result to like substance use, or skipping classes, or fighting, or just harmful behaviors that interfere with like our daily functioning, I want to also acknowledge that in a way this can be helpful. So when we have stress, we can honestly, at the end of the day, we learn more about how our body reacts and what coping skills work best for us. So I know later on we're going to talk about different coping skills and how we're able to manage those. And honestly, you get to learn so much about yourself just looking at those different coping skills and understanding, okay, these 3 work best for me. So I think learning ourselves in those moments of stress can help us stay alert, keep us focused, and really deal with those tough situations. So again, we talk about symptoms and causes, and so we really want to dive into when we turn for help. So it's definitely can relate to those things as grades are dropping, or you're feeling upset or angry or irritable. Social isolation is something that I think we see often, so less interested in activities with unhealthy coping skills. So when we say that, we mean like substance abuse or poor hygiene, self-harming behaviors, those type of things that we realize that that's when we need to turn for help. And when we turn for help, we look at definitely our resources, the people that we go to, Mrs. K, myself, the counselors in the high school as well.
And one of the things I know that we're hearing a lot from parents right now is that our students are isolating themselves. They're spending a lot more time in their bedrooms. So a lot of avoidant behaviors, spending long hours playing video games, again, looking on social media on their phones, things along those lines. So it's really important to try to meet our students where they're at as a parent as well. Popping your head in to check and see how things are going, encouraging your child to come downstairs and watch a movie with the family, or play a game. But you try to meet your child where they're at, as opposed to just kind of yelling and screaming, "Hey, come out of your room." You have to work that a little bit to create those bonds to get your teenagers out of their rooms.
So as we talk about that, we can now go into how do we manage all of this. So we came up with a way for it to be like a personal stress management plan. And so we'll go into each one, but these are kind of the main focus of tackling the problem, taking care of your body, and then being able to deal with those emotions. So each one of those kind of have an extension of what we're talking about. So as we talk about tackling the problem, it's really addressing it. So as, like, for instance, if we're dealing with poor grades or feeling overwhelmed with schoolwork, so we can really break it down into a to-do list, or breaking it down into small pieces. So class by class and what that looks like. So it's basically you're starting from the very beginning and understanding what the problem is and how we're going to address it from there. So I know Mrs. K talked about this with me as well, is prioritizing. So understanding what we can and cannot control, I think, is a big thing, because some things that I think as we learn what the problem is and addressing it, we learn that maybe some things are out of our control and what we can do to manage that. On this side here, on the slide, you'll see certain things to avoid. So this is something that you guys can be able to write down as well, as certain people that you may think that either or are a bad influence, or maybe are, like not staying on the path that they should be, or maybe certain places that you should avoid, or certain things that you should avoid. So this can be able to help you address that specific problem. So some of you guys may seen this before, and it's the circle of control. So this is something that we just talked about, is prioritizing and letting things go and understanding what we can and cannot control. So certain things that we can't control would be like the weather or others' emotions or certain things like that. We know that we're able to manage and understand, but it's something that is completely out of our control. And then I think the main thing is understanding what we can control. So understanding that we can control our actions, our emotions, we can control prioritizing our schoolwork and completing that. We can't control how much schoolwork we get, but we can definitely control being able to do that schoolwork.
And in relation to what that looks like in the world right now as well, is while we may not be able to control what's happening with the health crisis that's happening right now, we can control how often we are watching the news, or how often we're exposing ourselves to that information. So, you know, not to say that we may not watch the news at all, but it might be helpful not to have the TV on as much if we know the information that we're going to hear is stressful. So again, it's taking a look at, while there are so many things out of control, what can we control? And definitely our exposure to things that are stressful is one of them.
Mm-hmm. So the second thing that we want to look at is taking care of our body. So I know that when we talk about addressing the problem, I think that our mind and body are definitely all related. And once we are able to address that problem, it's really knowing how to take care of what's going on the inside. So when we talk about exercise, I'm sure you guys have heard of all this all the time, is that go outside and exercise. And I think during this time, it becomes a little bit more difficult for us. But doing things inside the home or going for a short walk around the block, certain things like that where you know that you're capable of doing and that are in your control, I think can be helpful. On the side here, it's just little like blurbs of statements that you can go to if you're feeling stressed and feel like exercise might be something that could be useful for you. And then understanding your limits and understanding what works best for you. We also, when we talk about exercise, it doesn't have to be something that's strenuous where you're running or anything like that. It can just be simple as breathing techniques or yoga or meditation. So after all the slides, we do have resources for that as well. But there are 2 links here that are for mindfulness, and there's also, it's called a 4-7-8 technique, which I think we'll see in the next slide, that you can utilize as well.
And these are helpful for adults as well as teenagers.
This is stuff that we do, guys. So this is something that we just talked about, is the 4-7-8 breathing. This is something you guys can go to as needed, and it's something that's pretty simple and you can even do just in your chair right now.